Good morning, lords, ladies, and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank David Mayhew and the Missing Salmon Alliance for inviting me here today to talk to you both from a personal perspective and also on behalf of the company I work for, Schöffel Country. Following on from Tom's incredibly poetic and eloquent talk, I too wanted to start by saying that I'm also not a scientist. So what I'm about to talk to you about today is grounded not in empirical scientific evidence, but in emotion, specifically in the emotional attachment I hope we all have with our environment and with our wildlife. Indeed, my primary motive for doing this talk today is a pretty simple and subjective one. The idea that the Atlantic salmon could quite feasibly be relegated to museums and historical archives alongside the passenger pigeon, the quagga, the dodo, and the western black rhinoceros is simply unbearable. It would be a travesty. As is the case with so many others, and I'm sure there's plenty of you in the room today, my connection to the Atlantic salmon is almost certainly rooted somewhere deep in my hunter-gatherer DNA. As the renowned wildlife artist Owen Williams once wrote in a piece for me at Field Sports magazine, we are all hardwired to be hunter-gatherers, whether we choose to recognize that or not. A significant part of our social structure has evolved around hunting and food. It is in our genetic heritage. And in Britain, the Atlantic salmon, along with red deer, has been at the very center of that paradigm for millennia. You see, I have been very fortunate to have hunted and fly fished pretty much my whole life, like Tom, and I've been fortunate enough to fish for and catch a myriad of species, freshwater and saltwater, in wide-ranging destinations in as far afield places as South Africa, Mozambique, Zambia, New Zealand, Australia, Russia, and of course here in the UK. And I can tell you that there is no other fish for which I have a greater reverence than the Atlantic salmon. I will never forget the first time I cradled a fresh-run spring salmon on the upper Arndilly beat of the Spey one bitterly cold March morning. My hands, feet, and face were numb with cold, but I barely noticed because I was so utterly transfixed by this fish. It was unquestionably the most beautiful fish I'd ever seen. But little did I know at the time that I was so affected by that fish for reasons that were way beyond my comprehension. Anyone who has ever felt the indescribable prickle of excitement as midway through a run, your line tightens and you feel that unmistakable first head shake of an Atlantic salmon will know that it is the most memorable, the most magical, the most unforgettable moment in all of country sports. There is nothing that can compare. There is no debate to be had. This is a fish that captures our imagination like no other. As Earl George Percy once said to me, there's just something about this species that compels those of us under its spell to spend many, often futile hours up to our armpits in freezing cold water, yearning for the fix that comes from the tightening of that line and the singing of the reel. And the more I've learnt about this special fish, the more in awe of them I have become. And the more deeply connected to them I realize I am. Like woodcock, wildebeest, and Arctic terns, our Atlantic salmon in the UK are one of the intrepid travelers of the natural world, undertaking incredible journeys from the headwaters of their natal rivers to the coastal waters off Greenland, and of course back again. But unlike wildebeest and some migrating birds, young salmon smolts enter the alien environment and venture out into the wide blue yonder with no guidance, no well-traveled veterans leading the way or looking out for them. As Sir Michael Wigan once wrote, they are a little fish urgently in need, needing to accumulate weight and gain getaway speed. Almost everything they encounter is an enemy. It really is against all odds, miraculous even, that even a tiny percentage of these fish make it back to their natal rivers as adults. There's no denying, salmon enrich our lives, and they always have. For millennia, humans have depended on them for sustenance and for sport. And entire ecosystems have depend on them for their survival. All along rivers flowing into the North Atlantic, you will find fishing huts full of people who derive an inexplicable sense of fulfillment from this fish and the experience of coming together with friends, family, and like-minded folk in their quest to catch one, only to put it back again. But the sad truth is that this keystone species now depends on us. Their demise is almost certainly our doing, the result of mismanagement, ignorance, short-sightedness, and greed. I personally may be motivated by my emotional connection to salmon through angling, but I also recognize that we have a moral and an ethical duty to do everything we can to halt their decline, to put right what has clearly gone so badly wrong. As we've already heard from the various speakers this morning, including His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, the writing is well and truly on the wall for all of us to see. Scientists have highlighted the severity of the situation in no uncertain terms, and we cannot afford to ignore them any longer. We all need to act and take some responsibility for the part we may have inadvertently played in their demise. As individuals, as companies, as organizations, as governments, and as nations, we have an obligation to play our part and to act now before it is too late. Coming back to Owen Williams' piece in Field Sports, he perfectly summed things up when he wrote, "This is our cultural heritage, which has served us well for millions of years. We owe it to future generations to ensure that however sophisticated society becomes, we will always have the opportunity to reconnect with our hunter-gatherer genes. Our social health depends on it." At Schöffel Country, we are a small core team made up of passionate country folk. Some of us shoot game, some of us fly fish, a few of us go deer stalking from time to time. But we all have one thing in common. We love the countryside, and we care deeply for the country way of life and all that it stands for. And we recognize how enriched our lives are by our contact with the natural world. We know that as a society, we will be culturally impoverished without our wildlife, without these iconic species that have for millennia played such an important role in our lives on so many different levels. And of course, it's not just our team who feel this way and feel motivated to make a difference. Our customers at Schöffel Country feel exactly the same way. We know this because we've asked them. Earlier this year, we ran a survey of our database, and one of the 14 questions we asked our customers was worded as follows: do you have any strong ethical views on issues such as environmental sustainability, animal welfare, or social responsibility that influence your decision to participate in any particular country sports or the brands you associate with them? If so, please outline what these are in 1 or 2 sentences. Well, of all of the questions we asked, this one solicited by far the most comprehensive and passionate response. Almost every single one of the 1,380 respondents answered this question, and a lot went to great efforts to do so. Almost all of them, the majority of them, had the same fundamental message at its core. And this is just one example which quite nicely sums that up. Environmentally, we are just guardians for those who follow. The longest journey starts with the first step. So everyone has a role to play in handing the natural world over to the next generation in the best possible shape. Sustainability now needs to be at the heart of everything we do. It needs to be at the heart of every business. It is what our customers expect, and it is our duty to deliver that. It is our responsibility to consider at every step of the way what impact our actions today will be having on tomorrow. So as a company and as individuals within that company, we recognize the importance of playing our part in contributing to solutions, in making a positive impact in a meaningful way, not just for the current generation and our grandchildren, but for all generations that follow. In real terms, we as a company, of course, can't provide the solutions that we need, but we can assist those who can by raising funds, by generating awareness, and by setting an example. We are very fortunate to have organizations like the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, Salmon and Trout Conservation, the Angling Trust, and the Atlantic Salmon Trust, who are dedicated to finding the solutions that we so badly need. We can make a meaningful contribution, each and every single one of us, by supporting them. We can play our part. And so, at Schöffel Country, we made a conscious decision to do more. We made environmental guardianship one of our 4 brand pillars. We established a sustainability team, our green team as we call them, to look at every single aspect of our business and to ensure that we're doing everything possible to reduce our carbon footprint. We're working on ways of cutting back the use of single-use plastic wherever possible, particularly in our packaging. We are placing natural, sustainable fibers at the very heart of our product development, and we have drastically reduced our waste. We've also taken a keen interest in what the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust are doing, an organisation at the very heart of the British countryside and one that I've always held in the highest regard. And we started to raise some funds for them wherever we can for some of their key research projects, and we will continue to do so wherever possible. And as some of you may already know, we are soon going to be launching a fly fishing range at Schöffel Country, which we're very excited about. But I'm particularly delighted to say that we've decided to pledge 1% of all of our global sales of our fly fishing range, that they will go directly towards the conservation of wild Atlantic salmon stocks. Some will, of course, see this as nothing more than a PR move. And yes, of course, there's no denying that it is a really lovely, positive message or story for us to tell. And it is one that will resonate deeply with our customers. We know that. But in truth, our reasons for doing so are a lot simpler than that. Simply put, we as a company recognize that we can actually make a difference at a time when literally every minute that goes by is a minute closer to us potentially losing another precious and iconic species for good. And I would strongly encourage other companies to do the same. Together, we can all make a positive contribution to better understanding why our precious salmon stocks are in such rapid decline. Until we know what is happening to our salmon, we cannot possibly save them. And I'll ask you, what could be more important, or indeed more fulfilling than that? Thank you very much.